The Galveston hurricane was a hurricane that struck the city of Galveston, Texas on September 8, 1900. The wind speed was estimated at 214 kilometers per hour, which corresponds to Category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale. The hurricane killed from 6,000 to 12,000 people. Official sources agree on the figure of 8,000. The hurricane is thus the third most deadly North Atlantic tropical cyclone, after the Great Hurricane of 1780 and Hurricane Mitch of 1998. The Galveston hurricane of 1900 is still the deadliest natural disaster in the history of the United States. The victims of the second on the list, Hurricane Okeechobee in 1928, became 6,000 people, and one of the most terrible hurricanes of recent years, Katrina, killed about 1,800 people. The hurricane appeared before tropical storms began to be officially named, so it has several names. It is generally referred to as the Galveston Hurricane of 1900, the Great Galveston Hurricane, or, especially in older documents, the Galveston Flood. Galveston locals called it the Great Storm or the Storm of 1900. Causes and meteorological features. The hurricane formed August 27th in the Atlantic Ocean as a tropical wave. By September 8th, it reached for Category on the Saffir-Simpson scale with winds up to 230 kilometers per hour and a minimum pressure of 936 bar. A storm surge of 4.6 to 6 meters flooded Galveston Island, located just 2.7 meters above sea level. The waves swept away buildings, turning them into splinters, and the wind ripped out trees and telegraph poles. The first news from Galveston came from a train that could not get closer than 6 miles to the harbor, where the prairie was strewn with wreckage and dead bodies. About 200 bodies were counted from the train. A large steamer was carried 2 miles from shore. No remains of the Galveston could be seen. There are undoubtedly at the hurricane caused a storm surge of more than 4.6 meters, which flooded the entire island. The waves ripped buildings from their foundations and smashed them into splinters. More than 3,600 houses were destroyed, and a mountain of debris towered near the shore. The few buildings that survived are located in the Strand area and are now tourist attractions. The maximum recorded wind speed was 160 kilometers per hour, but the Weather Bureau's anemometer was blown off the building shortly after this. Measurement 14. The eye of the storm passed over the city at about 8 p.m. The estimated maximum wind speed was 190 km/h. Because of destroyed bridges to the mainland and telegraph lines, there was no communication with the city. At 11 a.m. on September 9th, one of the surviving ships from the Galveston Wharf, the Farabee, reached Texas City, which was located on the west side of Galveston Bay. It carried 6 men who, upon arrival at the telegraph station in Houston at 3 a.m. on September 10th, relayed a short message to Texas Governor Joseph Sayers and U.S. President William McKinley. I have been directed by the Mayor and Citizens Committee of Galveston to inform you that the city of Galveston has been destroyed. The messengers reported an estimate of 500 dead. At the time, this was taken as an exaggeration. The people of Houston were aware of the storm and prepared to help. Almost immediately, workers were sent to the island by railroad and sea. The rescuers were faced with a completely destroyed city. It is assumed that 8,000 people, 20% of the island's population, became a victim of the elements. Estimates of the number of dead vary from 6,000 to 12,000. Most people drowned or were crushed by the wreckage of their homes. Many survived the storm itself, but died after several days under the rubble. Rescuers heard screams from under the rubble and pulled out whoever they could. About 30,000. Because of the large number of deaths, it was decided to bury the bodies at sea, but currents swept the bodies back to shore. 28. As a result, bodies were burned on funeral pyres for weeks after the storm. The authorities gave free whiskey to workers who had to throw their family members' bodies into the pyres. September on the Bolivar Peninsula, a train from Beaumont with 95 passengers was waiting for a ferry to take it to the island. When the ferry reached Galveston, the captain was unable to dock the vessel because of the swell. The train attempted to turn back, but was blocked by the rising water. 10 people from the Beaumont train made it to the Point Bolivar Lighthouse, where 200 Port Bolivar residents were already sheltering. The 85 passengers remaining on the train were killed by the storm. Surged out on September 12, 1900. The storm reached New York City. Wind speeds reached 105 kilometers per hour. The New York Times reported that pedestrian traffic was impeded and linked one fatality to the storm. An informational sign fell on a 23-year-old man due to the wind and punctured his head. Awnings and signs on many structures were damaged, and the tarp roof of the fire department headquarters was torn off. Heavy swell was also reported in New York Bay, and difficulty navigating the Hudson River. Uprooted trees were reported in Brooklyn for the surviving Galvestonians. Army tents were set up on the beach, so numerous that observers nicknamed the settlement White City on the beach. Some residents built huts from materials left over from previous structures. On September 12th, the first mail arrived in Galveston since the storm. Water service was restored the next day, and Western Union began offering telegraph service. 3 weeks later, cotton began shipping from the port. Again, prior to the 1900 hurricane, Galveston was considered a beautiful and prestigious city. It was referred to as Western Ellis Island and Southwestern Wall Street. However, after the hurricane, major development shifted north to Houston, which was experiencing an oil boom. The expansion of the Houston Canal in 1909 and 1914 ended Galveston's dreams of regaining its former glory. Many improvements were made to the island to prevent the possible effects of such storms. In 1902, construction of the Galveston Breakwater, for 0.8 kilometers long and 5 m high, was begun. The all-weather bridge replaced the hurricane-damaged bridges to the mainland. The greatest work was done in raising the city. Sand from dredging was used to increase the height of the city by 5.2 m, relative to its previous state. In the process, more than 2,100 structures were raised, including the 3,000-ton St. Patrick's Church. The island's protective wall and elevation build-up were named a National Historic Landmark by the American Society of Civil Engineers. In 2001 in 1915, Galveston was hit by a hurricane similar in strength and trajectory. The Galveston Hurricane of 1915 produced a storm surge of 4 meters in height. The Galveston Island disaster killed 53 people, a vast improvement over 1900. The last known survivor of the 1900 Galveston hurricane, Mrs. Maud Connick, died on November 14, 2004. At the stated age of 116, census records indicate a lower age. The historic port of Galveston operates the Texas Seaport Museum at Pier 21. It shows, among other things, a documentary called The Great Storm, thegreatstorm.is, a powerful reminder of the power of nature, but it is also a reminder of how important it is to be prepared for any challenge, and that even after the worst disasters we can recover and get on with our lives. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video.